Hi everyone, I can see a lot of names and I can see people are still connecting, so we might just give them a minute to do that. If you can show yourself, we'd be delighted. That would be very nice. That's lovely, thank you very much, but you don't have to, of course, and depends on the internet, of course, as well. So I think, Anil, are you happy enough if we just get going?
Yes, very much.
Good. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm very, very happy to see quite a few of you and also more connecting. As it's being recorded, I don't think we need to worry too much about content being lost for those that are joining a little bit later. So my name is Monika Mihm Carmichael. I'm the acting head of the program at the moment, and Professor Richard Dewhurst is sitting on my screen right next to me, and he is the deputy head of the program. And in fairness, he has been with the program right from the beginning, so you can direct lots and lots of questions towards him as well. We have prepared a small presentation just to give you a flavor of the animal nutrition program, if that's okay with you. We want to keep it quite short, and we're very lucky also that we have our IT technologist with us, Wendy McAllen, who's going to give you also a little overview over of Moodle, for example, the platform that we use. So I think what I'm trying to do is I'll go into share and share the brief presentation, and hopefully that will work. Just remember that I won't be able to see most of you when I'm sharing the document. So when it comes to the questions, perhaps we might just stop sharing. If there's any issue, put up your hand and Anil see you and can resolve any problems. I'm also going to go into presenter mode now in a little second and hope that will work. Sometimes that takes a bit of time. So here we are. I have already moved on, haven't I? Here we are. We're going to talk in this webinar, we're going to talk about our joint animal nutrition masters taught program. It's an online distance learning and a part-time postgraduate taught program. And as you will see in the next slide, it is a shared program between the University of Glasgow and SRUC in Scotland. And as I said, Professor Dewhurst is here to represent SRUC. We have prepared this between the three of us, Professor Richard Dewhurst, Dr. Reg Jones and myself. However, Reg Jones is sending his apologies. He's doing what every animal nutritionist should probably do right now. He's actually on a trial and feeding cows. So that's quite, I think we let him off for this one here. So I thought what we might want to do is have a quick look at the program structure and some of the courses. We'll spend just a little time on the third year of the part-time program, which is the dissertation year. And then Wendy will take over and give you a little introduction to the platform and how everything is presented. The team members that are available for email discussion and further information are listed here. We have our wonderful administrative assistant Imogen, who will be happy to look after admission, for example, and also looks after a lot of the assessment queries. As I said earlier on, we have Wendy here present in the webinar to look after the technology of the program, and we have Professor Dewhurst. Reg is not here, but he said he's very happy to share for us to share his email contact, myself. And we also have a student on standby who is very happy to answer any queries you may have. She's a dissertation student, one of my dissertation students, Lauren, who's a wonderful student also and has gone through the whole program almost to the end. I have listed here the program aims, and I realize this is, obviously enormous amounts to read at the moment, and I'm not expecting you to do so, but I have highlighted a few words that I think would be worthwhile remembering for this particular program. And that is, we're going to look at animal nutrition in this program, of course. This is why you're here. You're going to be equipped with a lot of in-depth knowledge and the understanding, but also the application. So I think that's really worthwhile thinking about this. We're talking about animal nutrition concepts, but not just the knowledge of it, but also the application. The program is very, very much research led, and that's also important to realize. You're going to really go to the absolute most recent cutting edge research underpinned concepts in animal nutrition. And as a related point to this, we're also going to give you a lot of training in the communication of the animal nutrition related science. So a lot of assignments, for example, are going to deal with how you communicate the science, and I'm going to show you a little example of this. Overall, of course, you want to be able to then, with this postgraduate degree, manage and design and evaluate existing diets, new diets, in the whole context of diet, the production in our production animals, of course, in our small animals or companion animals, more perhaps the health and some very specific disease issues. But actually, health and disease will go right across all animal species. And one of our second year students' assignments was going to illustrate this point exactly. I want to just stress the point again that the program and course leadership is shared between the University of Glasgow and SOUC. And as I said, Richard is the deputy program leader and has been involved in this right from the start. And this may be the point, Richard, if you want to introduce yourself. We're going to go into the courses in a little bit of time, so don't spend too long looking at that particular list of courses. But I think this might be a nice point for Richard to talk to you for a second.
Yeah, very, very happy to do that. Good afternoon, everybody. Really glad to be on this call. Just to say a little bit about SOUC. SOUC, Scotland's Rural College, operates right across Scotland and is involved in teaching both from apprentices through to having a PhD program within the college. Has a very large, for our size of organisation, research program, and also runs an advisory service. So farm consultancies and the veterinary investigation centres in Scotland are run by SOUC, and we have campuses in Inverness, Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Glasgow, and Dumfries. So we're pretty dispersed. Colleagues that you will be involved with on this course are really very active researchers in the area of livestock nutrition. That's part of the good thing about the course, is the complementarity between the SOUC's expertise in livestock nutrition and the applied livestock nutrition that our consultants bring to it. And the strengths in the University of Glasgow in other aspects of animal nutrition, equine and small animal and exotic. So we really cover any kind of species. So by myself, I head the Dairy Research Centre for SOUC, based in Dumfries in southwest Scotland. And my colleague, Professor John Newbold, is also involved in some of the teaching. John has a long international background in the feed industry, worked with some major feed companies in Europe and North America. And the other staff member that you will see a lot of in the course is Professor Jos Houdijk, that kind of mad Dutchman who a great enthusiastic. He heads our monogastric research centre, so involved in research on pigs and particularly on poultry. So you get the ruminants and the monogastric from a livestock point of view from SOUC. I'll hand you back to Monika.
Thank you very much, Richard. So I thought perhaps an idea would be to bring you through the actual program from year to year. So just to remind yourselves again, it's a 3-year part-time program. You have 3 terms really in every year that you're going to be involved with the program on a part-time basis. Wendy may have some comments on the actually amount of part-time, and you may have some ideas also of what part-time, how many hours you can spend. But in the end, we are probably talking about something like 12 hours plus that you would spend every taught week. And then you have perhaps a rest week in between, a couple of rest weeks until you move on to the next term. So it's that type of structure. So in year one, the year one is quite prescribed, and I'm just giving you the examples here of the courses that you would look after, or that you would encounter, sorry. In year one, term one would be taken up with some basics in the anatomy and physiology. Then you move on to biochemistry and more sort of in-depth of nutrition and metabolites, and then you would finish off that year with feed composition evaluation. I think Richard, you look after the January term course, and then Jos would look after the summer term course in year one. So these are prescribed courses. We call them the core courses, each of which has 20 credits. So you would accumulate 20 credits in each course, so 60 credits overall. And of course, there are then some assignments associated with each of these courses. And if you fulfill the requirements for these courses, then you have already acquired a postgraduate certificate in animal nutrition. Then you move on to the second year, and the second year now is structured a little bit differently. You have some options in the first term and in the second term as it's currently run. The third term is again, the summer term is again more prescribed because it's important to deal with these subject areas before you embark on the third year on the dissertation. So we're going to have a quick look at what sort of options you could actually take in the second year in the first term. You could look after, if you're interested in more monogastric nutrition, you would perhaps then take the feed processing course, the applied nutrition rationing course in monogastrics. Each of these courses is a 10-credit course. Each of them has one assignment at the end, and then you might move on to the second part of that year two, to perhaps something like equine nutrition or small animal and exotic nutrition, and a nutrition and health course, each of which again are 10 credits. So by the time of spring or Easter, you would have accumulated 40 credits in year two. Reg is not here at the moment, who would have told you a little bit about the nutrition and health course in detail, but I have actually copied a wonderful assignment example into here, which was done by one of our second year students, student Louise, who I'm already in conversation with, who wants to do a dissertation on a zoo animal subject. So she comes from the zoo background. She's a zoologist and animal carer in one of the zoos here in the UK, and as part of her nutrition and health assignment, she looked at the iron storage diseases in some captive species. And that's the type of assignment that we're talking about, that I sort of mentioned very, very briefly earlier on, where we combine aspects of knowledge and understanding of the animal nutrition in these species with the science that is underpinning this, with these science communication skills. And Louise, as you can see, has prepared a wonderful leaflet for caretakers on this particular disease, where she goes into quite a bit of detail of the pathology of it, of the diagnosis of it, treatments of it, and very importantly, of course, how to manage that disease and prevent that disease. And she's illustrated that nicely, giving some good detailed information for the caretaker. So that's the sort of type of assignment that you might encounter in those particular courses. So that year two finishes, I'm just going back to that slide before, the year two finishes then with two more courses in the summer, as it's currently being done, a current topics course, and a research methods course. And I can't emphasize the research methods course enough. These two are actually core. They are requirements to finish off the second year and to carry on into the third year, into the dissertation year. And I'm going to speak a tiny bit more about the research methods course when we come to the summary of the whole program. So year 3 here is the dissertation year. So you have now accumulated 60 credits in every year. So you've accumulated 120 credits, and then you have certain obviously requirements of passing these assignments to carry on to the master's year. So by the end of the second year, you have already got a diploma in animal nutrition, and now you have the dissertation year. And my primary role is probably to look after dissertations and the dissertation year at the moment, and I cannot perhaps emphasize enough that this can't be taken lightly. This is quite substantial. You know, I've put in 525 hours notional time. It's not something that should be underestimated. You know, this is you know, a really quite a big piece of report writing and scientific report writing that is going to be very, very closely scrutinized. It is going to be marked by 2 independent markers. It's going to be looked at by external examiners, etc., because it would then fulfill the requirements if you pass this for the masters in animal nutrition. The dissertation itself can be either coming from original studies, so it's something that you would perhaps more normally associated with a research project, but it can also be in the form of reviews, narrative reviews, even a systematic review, or perhaps if you're working more in nutritional policy or in other aspects of the industry, it could be a policy review. So it can have different structures, different contents, but it always has to be very scientific and provide a lot of scientific and critical engagement with the literature. And it is then submitted as a written report, but also as a presentation. And at the moment, we have the weighting of 80% to 20% in terms of report and presentation. So this is really a summary again of the whole animal nutrition program. We have year 1 here where we have the core courses which are prescribed. Then we have year 2 where you would perhaps make a decision of whether you want to look more at ruminants or monogastric species nutrition in terms of feed processing and applied nutrition. And then you have a range of courses, 10 credit courses, that you have a choice with. You might want to go more into equine or more small animal, or you might focus on nutrition and health and the feed industry. And then again, we have current topics and research methods. We do actually have a change envisaged for the next couple of years, and I've highlighted this here in red. And that is the research methods are so important if you move on to the dissertation year that we are going to aim to change that to a 20 credit course, which will be done not in summer as previously, but actually will be done in spring, because it will prepare you with your assignment for the proper research project that you might want to undertake then in the dissertation year. And that gives sort of you an overview of the whole animal nutrition program. And I'm going to pass you on to Wendy McCallan, who's our technologist and looks after you not just in terms of Moodle support, but I think there's a big role in that. Wendy isn't there. And Wendy will take over now and bring you through the different slides. Wendy, you just tell me when to click on and I might just do that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Monica. So hi everyone. So I'm Wendy. So I'm the learning technologist that helps with the animal nutrition program. So that could be anything from developing new content. It can be supporting students if they're having issues. So I have quite a big range of roles that I kind of cover. So on this first slide, I just want to show this is the kind of basic structure that we have for a 10-week course. So you can see up at the top, the University of Glasgow have moved to a kind of more of a template system, so that it means that if you're doing different courses, then things should be in the same, roughly in the same place, no matter which course you're doing. So you can see up at the top, the kind of orange, sorry, it's quite small, but you can see the orange icon, that's the course information and support. That's always up at the top of the course. And then we have the cerise icon as the assessment and feedback. So you always know that all the information for the assessments is right up near the top of the course. Then it's built into a weekly structure. Now what we do is we release the content weekly, partly so that you try and keep up. I'm actually a part-time master's student myself. I'm hopefully just completing my diploma on a different course. So I understand how difficult it is if you've got a full-time job as well as studying part-time. So that's one of the reasons why we try and keep you all at the same pace. So we release the content weekly. We tend to open it up just before the weekend. So if you have a bit of time, then you can get a slight bit ahead in the content. And then it means that you can prepare for the week ahead. Because I know it is very difficult to juggle being a part-time student. And you can see in this 10-week course, then we have 5 weeks, and then we have a catch-up week or a revision week. Some people call it a reading week. It's all the same. So it means that there's a week's break, so you can either catch up with material that you haven't managed to, or you can just have a bit of a break before the next 5 weeks of the course. And then you can see at the bottom, the kind of purple box is about giving course feedback. That's always very important if you can to give course feedback. It's at the end of every module, you tend to get sent an email. And it means that we can look at all your feedback and we can make changes so that although it might not help you, then it means it'll help future students, which is it's a really great thing to do. But people have their contact details there as well, so don't feel as though you need to wait until the end of a course. We would like to, if there's an immediate issue that you would like resolved, then feel free to email or post on the forums. We have Moodle forums. We've got quite a few different communication means, so feel free to reach out if you need to. Monika, can you just go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So this is just an example of a lesson that we have in the digestive anatomy course. So it's just showing one slide. So all the lessons are built so that you can sit them whenever you want. So it's an asynchronous model that we have. So it means that you can work through it. You can spend the time looking, however much time you want to look at it. And then later what we tend to have live sessions. So it means that then if you have any questions about the content, then you can feel free to come in and speak to the staff member of the course. So this is just showing the kind of, obviously for digestive anatomy, you need to know about teeth, especially things like rabbits who need more work, or guinea pigs maybe that need more work on their teeth to help them with the anatomy. So Monika, if you can just go to the next slide, please. This is another example of a lesson. So this is about the small animals and exotics. So this is obviously this is just showing, I'm not showing the video, but it's just showing the kind of front screen of the dog owner perspectives on raw feeding, which is obviously quite a topical subject that gets covered within that course. We have lots of different types of resources. So we have lessons, we have videos, we have some courses have group work, we have forums, we have books, we have research papers. There's lots of different resources that build up to for the content for you, but it's all clearly signposted just for all the students. Next slide, please. So this was just another example of just one slide from the feed processing for ruminants. So this is actually Richard's course, sorry, Professor Dewhurst's course. So I don't know if he wants to come in and tell you a small amount about the course. You're on mute, Richard.
Always on mute. Yes, as was explained in the first year of the course, there are two quite large courses that SIUC are involved in teaching: the feed processing one and the nutritional biochemistry. Actually, the feed processing is my colleague Jos, who does more on this, but I mean this is just another illustration of one of the really interesting things that nutritionists tend to talk in terms of energy. When we think about nutrients, we can think about absorbed amino acids and absorbed glucose and absorbed fatty acids on the one hand, and think about the roles of those in as building blocks of milk or for growth, or the effects of those on other physiological processes. But when we evaluate feeds, we often think about the energy content of nutrients, about the energy content in the feed itself, which we measure by effectively burning it in a bomb calorimeter to see how much energy we can release when you burn a feed. All the way through to the energy content of nutrients as they're being absorbed into the bloodstream of the animal, which is very approximately what we call metabolizable energy.
Right, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the online reading list. The university provides this, so it's actually a TALIS for anyone who's really interested in reading lists. It's a TALIS reading list that we have, and the university buys subscription to an awful lot of book publishers, research papers. So I'm not saying all of your resources are available online, but we try and, sorry, can you just go back? Thanks. But we try and provide as many resources available online as possible. It's a absolutely fantastic resource, so that you don't have to go out and buy books. You don't have to buy subscriptions to other to different publishers. All of that is done through the university library. But we have a fantastic support for students at the University of Glasgow. They have all online students have access to not all of the support services, but the majority of the support services. We have the disability service, we have the student learning development team who do lots of different courses on critical critical writing, different writing guides and things. There's lots of different courses that you'll also have access to that are outside the animal nutrition program, but will help you with your academic journey. So that's pretty much me. If you want to go on to the next slide, Monika.
Yeah, so that was a little run through the structure and some detail of the animal nutrition program. I have only been involved a few years now, as I said, Richard, right from the beginning, but it has been incredibly interesting building these sort of quite personal relationships with some of the students. I have mentioned a couple of students already, and you can see that I already know them quite well. So I think one strength of this program is that we look after our students quite personally, and the services that Wendy is also referring to, that the university will look after you. So if there are problems, you know, that we know there will be problems time-wise with part-time, and Wendy, you know exactly how hard it is, and people have, you know, lots of family and other you know, factors that will try and interfere with your learning. So please never shy away then from contacting us, contacting the course leaders or the program leader or the administrative assistants for telling us about the problems you encounter. We will meet with everyone individually. We will talk to you. We'll see what services may be available for you. And like Wendy just said, you know, the university is really, really good looking after both undergraduate and postgraduate students from that perspective as well. And the success is, and Richard, you can perhaps talk about the success that, you know, we have a considerable number of people finishing off with their dissertations, with their masters. And our external examiners always say these are really high quality Really, really good, successful master's degrees. Richard, if you want to just talk about that and the sort of careers perhaps that our master's students can have
Yeah, I mean,
afterwards.
it's the diversity of students on the program, both in terms of the species interests that people have interest in, but right across the world. I mean, that's one of the good things about the course being asynchronous. That I mean, we do try to arrange our question and answer sessions at times that work, but those are also recorded. But I know we've had students in from Canada all the way around to New Zealand and everywhere in between on the course, and quite a lot of interest in cats and dogs and horses. But I supervised a dissertation that involved work with lowland anoas, which was a species of ruminant that I wasn't aware actually existed, but some of the zoo species of ruminant. But that was somebody who was working in a zoo setting. So quite nice to be at the interface between my interest. I'm interested in dairy cows, but a lot of that is really closely related to work on, for example, feeding zoo animals and how you manage grazing for zoo animals. So
we are lucky in that respect, aren't we, Richard? Because we also have our ex-program leader who works again in the feed industry. We have other specialists from both equine and small animal nutritional companies that help supervising dissertations and give us advice and come into some of the courses, as you could see perhaps briefly in the one small animal and exotics course. So we do have quite a nice network as well that we can refer to for both, content and any queries, but also for the dissertations, of course. Yeah. I think I'm going to stop sharing now and just open the platform for any queries, if
just
that's okay. And
on
yeah,
the dissertations. I mean, one of the things that we've learned over the years, there are. I mean, on paper, it's possible that you could run a study, for example, associated with your workplace or a client that you are working with, or something like that. But those kind of projects can be quite difficult as well in terms of ethical approval for research. So we're very cautious about those kind of projects. We had experiences where getting ethical approval takes half of the year to get approval, and then you're struggling with time to actually do work. So it's a long way away, but worth thinking about at this stage. Just where you would want to go with a dissertation. I think just reflecting on other things that the assessments are something that maybe Monika hasn't mentioned, that again there's quite a range of methods that we use for assessment in the courses in the first and second year, from short assignments, I mean particularly reviewing research papers and synthesizing research information at the master's level. That's very much what we're looking to do, to get you dipping into the recent scientific literature and analysing that. But also there are other units other courses where the assessment may be based on producing a poster to synthesize information. And we also, in a number of courses, use extended matching questions as a kind of online form of assessment.
so we've got a question here. First of all, about a week of study. Richard, I hate to, Wendy or Richard, do you want to very briefly just say the amount of work that you would have or that you would deal with during that week of one of your courses, perhaps, Richard, and whether during that week you would actually meet up either individually or meet up as a group on one of your live sessions.
So in a typical week on, say, the nutritional biochemistry program, there would be recorded material that is, I mean, the base of it is a PowerPoint with me talking to slides. That may be anything from 20 to 40 slides to work through the content on. There would then be a reading list, and try to make it that if there are weeks where there is a lot of recorded lecture material, there might be less reading material, and we give reading material, some of which we say is recommended and some of which we say is compulsory, inverted commas, but some of it is more optional, so if you have more time to dig into that. Typically we have a question and answer session 3 or 4 times throughout the 10 weeks of the course, so it's not every week. That attendance at those, I mean, they are recorded, and obviously with people working and different time zones around the world, that makes it difficult for some to attend. Usually the question and answer sessions, it's a combination of looking at course material from the previous weeks and picking up any questions about that. We may have had in some courses a discussion forum where we've put papers out and encouraged the students to discuss it amongst themselves, and then we pick that up in the Q&A session as a discussion. And inevitably there's always quite a discussion about the assignments, the assessments. There are formative and summative assignments. This is a University of Glasgow terminology, so I pause there because I'm not so used to it in SIUC terminology. But essentially, we have assignments that are there to give you practice and experience of different formats, but don't count to the final mark that you get. And there are others that contribute to the mark that you get for a course.
And in relation to interaction with the course lecturers or the course leader, it really is as much as you want or need. I think, Richard, you've just said really, there could be a live session, could be once every 5 weeks, could be a webinar by an expert specialist in that particular area. That's what is often organized in the small animal course. If you require an extra session on some of the technical aspects, Wendy might organize a session. And Wendy, I think you also have a lot of common sessions for postgraduate students and postgraduate taught students at the University of Glasgow that you're inviting people from this program to.
Yeah, so one of the sessions that we got the student learning development team to run was the most recent one was the generative AI. So it was going through the guidance. So we have guidance online at the University of Glasgow to make sure that you don't stray into any bad habits, to make sure that you're clear with your assignments and what you can use the tools for and what you can't use the tools for. So we had a joint session for that. So that was for all the postgraduate taught students, the online distance learning students. The recording is available. What we have is we also have a course called the Hub. So obviously for animal nutrition, it's called the Animal Nutrition Hub, and it has lots of different guides, study guides, links to different sessions, recordings of sessions, things like if you need help creating posters for one of the assignments, we have links to that. We have, but we've got contact details for all the staff as well. So not only do we run the live sessions in the courses, but we also have the staff details that you could, so you could email if you want to email the staff rather than just posting on the forum. But we also have the forums that the staff check as well, because they get sent an email from the forum posts as well. So it depends on the nature of your request. Depends on whether you should really email. So for example, asking for an extension, then that would go to, say, the course coordinator. But if you're wanting to ask something specific around the structure for the assignment, for example, then you could post that to the forum, and then everybody else gets that feedback as well. So we have lots of different means of communication, and obviously it's because it's asynchronous learning, depends on when you get to that point and you have a question, then you'll have to make the leap to communicate. So that's why it might seem a wee bit more hands off, but it's not really, because you need to reach that point to then think of the question and then to ask. So, but there's loads of information.
Yeah, it sort of depends on you how much you actually want to interact, probably. But we had actually a couple of specific questions here in the chat about, first of all, the supervisor. The program director, and Richard, you may correct me on this, tends to be the sort of overall advisor for the students registered on the program. However, obviously for every dissertation student, we have a specific SRUC or Uni of Glasgow supervisor. You may also have an external supervisor. If you're working in a zoo, you do need an external supervisor for your project, and the supervisor team will then be the external supervisor and your internal Uni of Glasgow or SRUC supervisor. And you might have your supervisory team will meet with the student then very, very regularly. And then there was another, sorry, go on, Richard.
Your go-to person for the courses in the first 2 years would really be the course leader, and they would be tending to run the question and answer sessions. And I think the forum is important. That we sometimes use that to initiate discussions. I gave examples where we put some papers out for discussion and chat amongst the students, and the course leader might moderate that and chip in and prompt discussion. But it's also a place where if you have a question, particularly the kind of question that maybe the rest of the students are thinking the same thing, if there's something that doesn't look quite right, even that you want to question, then that's a good thing to put in the discussion forum, and it helps the rest of the group. As Wendy says, if it's something personal to you, then you can email us individually.
Yeah, the more pastoral advice perhaps would come, from Imogen, perhaps, who is our administrative assistant. She may be able to guide you, but then we would also like you to contact the program leader, I think, if you need to make principal decisions about the program. We had another chat question about entry and exit in terms of doing 1 year and then perhaps taking some time out. As far as I understand, there is an overall time limit to do a part-time master's degree of 7 years. It may be 6 years. I think it's 7 years, but it may be 6 years. So it's quite a long time overall. And we do have different models. We do have people that have managed to do 1 year or 2 years, finish off with the diploma, and then had to take some time out before they came back for the dissertation year. So we've had those models before. They need to be discussed. They need to be discussed. But we've had all this. We've had extensions, Richard, haven't we? Quite long extensions sometimes. We've had people taking time out because for personal reasons they had to take time out, and then they come back into the program. So we've had lots of different modules, and to sort of account for the fact that you're trying to do this on top of all your other commitments. So that has worked very well, actually. There's a networking question, I think, Anil, you've just posted in. Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, Wendy and Richard have both talked about the networking within the program on the forums and working together.
Some
There,
of that
yeah,
is, sorry to just
go
jump in
on.
there.
Yeah.
There's some group working elements in some of the
Yeah.
courses, and so in which case you have to produce something with a small group of people. So it's a fantastic way to get to know other people on the course. But we also have introduction forums, and it's great for, you can post a small video of yourself saying who you are, where you're based, for example, what animal species you're interested in, and it's a great way to connect with other people and see other people on the course as well. So yes, we encourage them as much as possible. There's not actually a in person that I'm aware of, but there's nothing to stop students meeting up. Say, for example, if there's a group of you that are interested in, I don't know, pigs or something, then if there's a national pig conference, you could always meet up at the conference if there's a few of you going. So
it may depend a little bit on the funding, Richard. You may have had that example of dissertation students being able to take their dissertation poster or talk to a national conference and networking with other people in that respect. So it will depend probably a little bit on the dissertation and on the funding that is available. Louise, who is in second year on that, who had this wonderful exotics brochure, she has a small network herself of a couple of people that have actually already done the program, and that's how she got into the program. So, you know, there's nothing to prevent you from establishing your own little network if you're local. You know. There we've got a question on the research projects. Do you want to talk more about the research projects, Richard? I think Richard already mentioned that we do have a slight issue with experimental projects in the dissertation year, in that ethics licenses need to be in place before you can actually do experimental work. If you have from your employment, from your place of employment, if you're bringing data sets, accumulated data, we can't just convert that into a research project either. We do actually also need ethical permission to analyze that from a research question point of view. But those type of ethics licenses are a bit easier to obtain. If you're thinking more of a survey, like the one Wendy referred to, the owner survey of perceptions on raw food diet in dogs or something, then that type of project actually takes quite a long time to get ethical permissions for, which is exactly the reason why we're trying to move our research course into the spring of second year, that we have the whole rest of that second year to obtain ethical permissions to carry out that type of survey-based studies. Richard, do you want to mention a couple of examples of dissertations that you have done?
Yeah, I mean the ones I've been involved are more at the experimental end of things, which I say we're kind of a bit cautious about going forward. Probably the most exciting one was one looking at fecal particle size analysis of a range of zoo animals and looking at that in relation to the grazing behaviour of different types of ruminants, different breeds of deer, and say lowland anoas and other exotic ruminants that I hadn't heard of. Where I think the kind of project that pulls together a meta-analysis based on the scientific literature, assembling a data set of published data and analysing that in a meta-analysis type of approach. We have one project that's on the cards at the moment, looking at essential oil feeding, a kind of supplement for some ruminant species. Just looking at that, but basing that on bringing together information from already published studies. That's an easier thing to do.
Yeah, we have vitamin supplementation studies, systematic reviews attempting to answer quite a focused research question on protein source, using algae as a protein source in small animal nutrition. And we have probiotics, we have the influences on the microbiome. It depends on the research question. We have actually a lot of, Richard, you probably agree, we probably have the majority of dissertation projects are probably small animal, exotic, and a little bit of equine focused versus production animals. But we do have a research student in Ireland at the moment who's going to look at sustainable sustainable production of protein sources to reduce the transport costs, for pig feed, etc. So Xenia had a question there, I just saw. Oh, continue on to PhD. That will, well, Richard is the person to talk to perhaps. That will depend, of course, on how you enjoyed your master's project particularly, and whether PhD funding or funding streams at least are going to be available. But I could see a PhD project working remotely in the sense of having that the University of Glasgow SAUC are the academic supervisors, but I think you would definitely have to work somewhere where you have internal supervisors for the data generation, and you have to have very close supervisory team, and it probably would involve a lot of online meetings. But I could see that working, yeah, Richard, I'm sure. If an internal supervisor helped generating the data, yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, industrial doctorates is a kind of emerging area. I mean, SIUC, I described it a bit earlier, is in a kind of transition in terms of its degree awarding powers. It's recently got its own authority to award taught degrees as SIUC itself, and has a doctoral college, and given that we're quite an applied organisation, working very much with industry, so I think I can see that being an area that we will develop as we move forward with awarding our own PhDs. But I think, as Monika alludes to, finding the right way for that to work. It's one thing doing a lot of the coursework for the masters online, but traditional PhD is much more hands-on and face-to-face. Just finding the right model to work for that, I think. But I think the whole community is looking at ways that might make that work, and by the time you got to having an MSc, I suspect there may be more opportunity in that area. I'm assuming you're looking to, not to come to Scotland to do a PhD, but to do a PhD in your own location. Historically, there would have been quite, there are kind of residence requirements to be, to be in the university for a period of time and things like that. But I think some of those rules are changing over time as we.
Yeah, we have a couple of very, very quick questions before we have to finish the session, Anil, don't we? There is one question on aquaculture, quite specifically, and the second one on, do you have to have professional experience to be currently working in this field, Madeleine? Richard, what is your impression? I think if this is of interest to you and of academic interest to you, I would say you would get enough grounding in the first year to continue on to dissertation level and master's level. Absolutely. To
Yes,
answer Madeleine's question.
Yeah. People who are working in technical roles in, I mean, a lot of people on the course are in technical roles, whether it's everything from vets and vet nurses through to people working in animal feed companies, people in technical roles. Then yeah, I think that's a good basis, along with the material you'll learn on the course.
But you don't have to have specific detailed knowledge already on animal nutrition. I think good sort of biological knowledge is probably sufficient to get started, and you will acquire the knowledge. The question on aquaculture, we do not have aquaculture at the moment, as far as I'm aware. Richard, I don't know whether that's something. We do have connections though, and we can make connections. So if that is something of interest to you, then we can definitely put you, and certainly for the dissertation year, make the connection through our colleagues, where you could definitely study a topic in relation to aquaculture. As I said, the one dissertation project goes into that area because the algae I'm talking about was actually more in a totally different part of the world. I think was more intended in terms of aquaculture management, but now they're investigating it as a source of protein for small animals. But we have some aquaculture connections through colleagues, which we could explore definitely. And then is there a last question? Production animals, dairy cattle. I think this is for you, Richard. Would it help formulate the diets? I would hope so, definitely.
Yes, I mean, obviously in the area of ration formulation, there are lots of different softwares and systems that are used in different countries around the world. So it would focus more on the principles, but there are sessions with some of the SOUC's consultants who are, day-to-day rationing farm animals, for example. So yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
Get experience working with people who are doing rations.
Yeah.
And evaluating rations.
Yeah. Just coming back to the question earlier on about how much professional background do you have to bring along to this program. One of my dissertation students is a receptionist, but she works, in a veterinary practice and got more and more interested and became more and more knowledgeable, and is now, finishing this program very successfully, I hope. So it does depend a little bit on your, not just on the background, but also on your motivation, of course, that you bring along. I feel that we have to finish this. Anil, you keep us right on this one.
Yes, I think.
Yes.
I think all this at the end.
I think it's come to the end, so I've already put that into the chat. But thank you very much for coming along. It was lovely seeing some of you and hearing some of you and seeing some of the questions as well. And please, I don't know, Anil, whether you can share the PowerPoint to the people that registered, but I would say you'd be quite welcome to that. And contact us. Just contact us and talk to us. Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Anil, as well for organizing this and helping us through this.